there is a great risk that the government will be able to freely change its interpretations like it has done many times in the past. This would practically mean the invalidation of Article 9 of the Constitution. Minasan konnichiwa, and welcome to Let's Ask Shogo. The 9th article of the current constitution that was enacted after World War II prohibits the use of military force and denies war. Hearing this, you might think that Japan has learned its lesson after the horrible war and has made an oath to never repeat the tragic history again. However, did you know that Japan's war funds is the 9th biggest in the whole world? Also, in recent years, there's been a debate to try to fundamentally change this peaceful constitution. So today, I'll explain about what Article 9 of Japan's constitution is. Then I'll explain what Japan's unique organization, the Self-Defense Forces, which is funded by Japan's military budget, is, and how it was born. At the end, I would like to introduce the ongoing discussion about amending the constitution to make the Self-Defense Forces into Japan's official armed forces. However, before I start, I must say I am not a politician, nor am I a person who majored in politics. Please understand what I'm going to be talking about today is based on what I personally studied about Japan as a Japanese man, and it is evidently biased on my own values. I know that today's topic can be very controversial, so after watching this video, please let me know your opinions in the comments. In this channel, you can take a closer look at Japanese traditional culture, tips on traveling to Kyoto, and social problems in Japan. So learners and lovers of Japanese language and culture, be sure to subscribe to enjoy more content. それでは本日も参りましょう。First, please let me explain about the Article 9 of the Constitution, which you cannot leave out when discussing about Japan's military power. After the tragedy of World War II, Japan was placed under the US control for a new start. At that time, the political and educational systems were all reviewed, and a new pacifistic constitution was created in order to eliminate the revival of militarism. As the only country in the world to have suffered from atomic bombings, the people of Japan accepted this new constitution in order to prevent the horrors of war from ever being repeated. Renunciation of war. Article 9. 1. Aspiring sincerely to an international peace based on justice and order. The Japanese people forever renounce war as a sovereign right of the nation, and the threat or use of force as a means of settling international disputes. 2. In order to accomplish the aim of the preceding paragraph, land, sea, and air forces, as well as other war potential, will never be maintained. The right of belligerency of the state will not be recognized. What an ideal and wonderful constitution. You might have thought of it that way. However, going against this statement, Japan's military spendings was the 9th highest in the world in 2020, costing approximately $50 billion. Then how can Japan, which is not supposed to have any military force, spend the world's 9th highest military expenditures? This is because instead of an army, there is a self-defense forces in Japan. Next, let's unravel the history of Japan's self-defense forces. As explained earlier, after World War II, Japan was disarmed by the US, so we would not start a war again. However, a certain event triggered the US to decide to rearm Japan. It was the Korean War that started in 1950. After North Korea attacked South Korea and seized its capital, MacArthur, the military officer in charge of Japan's jurisdiction, was assigned to drive North Korea back. But if the number of troops stationed in Japan decreased, the Soviet Union might take advantage of the opportunity to attack Japan. Fearing this, the US created an organization called the National Police Reserve to enable Japan to defend itself. No one could call it an army because they created a constitution that says Japan cannot hold military power. Therefore, they positioned it only as a competent organization to supplement the police. But of course, the weapons used are no different from those used by a regular army. The National Police Reserve later changed its name, and in 1954, it became the Self-Defense Forces as we know of today. The Self-Defense Forces still exist today as an organization for national defense, disaster relief, and international peace cooperation activities, which is why huge military budgets are used for their activities. How can you say that the self-defense forces are non-possessing forces while they own weapons at the level of a regular army? In response to this question, the government has stated its position that Article 9 of the Constitution does not deny the right to self-defense, which is recognized by international law. In other words, the self-defense forces maintains the minimum necessary force to defend Japan and does not violate the Constitution. But can the size of the world's 9th biggest military spending and newest weapons and the number of military personnel really be called minimum necessity? Can we clearly say that Japan is a pacifistic nation that the Constitution defines? Many experts have argued that if the Constitution is read literally, the self-defense forces would only be unconstitutional. When the current Constitution was enacted in 1946, it was explained as renouncing all wars, including wars of self-defense. If someone who doesn't know about the history of the self-defense forces looks at it, they would probably ask, how is this different from a regular army? One thing that I do not want you to misunderstand here is that I don't believe that these self-defense forces should all be eliminated because it's unconstitutional. I do understand the theory that every country needs a certain level of national defense. Also, many lives were saved by the members of the self-defense forces in times of natural disasters, and people need their help in emergencies. But I am only positive about the self-defense forces if Japan renounces war. Unfortunately, little by little, Japan might be becoming a country capable of war again. First of all, in 2014, the government changed its interpretation of the Constitution, allowing the right to exercise collective self-defense. The conditions when force may be used in collective self-defense are defined as the following. An armed attack against a foreign state that is in a close relationship with Japan occurs, and as a result, threatens Japan's survival and poses a clear danger to overturn fundamentally its nationals' right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Then, in the following year, 2015, a new law was enacted that also allowed the following things. 1. Expand the range of activities of the self-defense forces and the weapons they can use. 2. Shorten the time for debate before dispatching the self-defense forces in the event of an emergency. 3. Enable rescue of Japanese nationals overseas and protection of US vessels. 4. Relax standards for weapons use. 5. Add penalties for disobedience to superiors. For many years, the government has recognized that the use of self-defense forces is authorized only to the minimum extent necessary in the event of an armed attack against Japan. Therefore, it pursued a policy of exclusive defense, prohibiting the use of force overseas and the exercise of the right of collective self-defense, as well as not possessing any offensive weapons. This has changed drastically since 2014 due to the reason of the security environment surrounding Japan changing and becoming more severe. Today, the self-defense forces are able to participate in overseas wars. Many authorities, such as the Japan Federation of Bar Associations and university professors, have criticized the government for this as a clear violation of the Constitution, but so far, nothing has changed. The biggest problem is that the conditions in which force can be used in collective self-defense, as explained earlier, are very unclear. The government has stated that the government will make a comprehensive judgment when the time comes to make a decision. Many say that a democratic nation must not have a system that allows the government to make such major political decisions, which could threaten people's lives and well-being. the current administration is further trying to expand the activities of the self-defense forces by even changing the constitution. In March 2018, the government published a draft article adding the following text to Article 9 of the Constitution. 1. The provisions of the preceding article shall protect the peace and independence of Japan and not preventing the taking of self-defense measures necessary to maintain the security of the country and its people. As an organization with the capability to do so as provided by law, the self-defense forces shall be maintained with the Prime Minister as the Supreme Commander and Supervisor. 2. The actions of the self-defense forces shall be subject to the approval and other controls of the Diet as provided by law. Simply said, the self-defense forces can be used if necessary, with the Prime Minister as the Supreme Supervisor, regardless of the content of the original Article 9 of the Constitution. The definition of what condition are necessary measures of self-defense is very ambiguous. There is a great risk that the government will be able to freely change its interpretations like it has done many times in the past. This would practically mean the invalidation of Article 9 of the Constitution, which is equal to the removal of a major pillar of pacifism of the Japanese Constitution. Although the Constitution has not yet been actually changed, this debate is currently gaining attention again in Japan due to the war between Russia and Ukraine. Finally, I want to emphasize again that what I've explained in this video is only what I have studied based on my own values and is not representative of the Japanese people. There are some people who seriously believe Japan should immediately militarize and attack enemy countries before they attack us. Such people are also Japanese citizens, and as we live in a democratic country, I believe that their opinions should be respected as much as everyone else's. However, I personally strongly believe that Japan has a responsibility to reflect on the tragic war it has caused in the past, and to continue to emphasize the importance of peace in the world as a sole atomic-bombed nation. I also fear that by eliminating the peaceful aspect of the Constitution, Japan will lose trust from the world and create a Japan might attack storyline to other countries. I've learned from Sun Tzu's Art of War that starting a battle must be the very last option, and from the philosophies of Alfred Adler that violence is the most immature means of communication. Therefore, I agree with Japan having a certain level of military force for self-defense, and the Constitution being updated if necessary to suit the modern society. However, I am absolutely against the nation choosing violence as a tool of diplomacy, no matter what. There is no winner in war. Everyone who takes part in it will lose their lives, families, friends, and happiness. True victory can only be accomplished when we all renounce killing as a way of communication and choose the long and difficult but necessary conversations and discussions to solve our problems. I dream of a day where all people can be equally respected and loved by each other. Then lastly, today's conclusion. Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution, enacted after World War II, prohibits the use of force and denies war in order to prevent the horrors of the past from ever being repeated. However, contrary to this statement, Japan's military spendings were the 9th highest in the world in 2020, costing approximately $50 billion. This is because instead of an army, in Japan there's the self-defense forces, which were established due to the Korean War in 1950 for Japan to defend itself from any foreign attacks. Although many scholars point out that the self-defense forces would only be unconstitutional if the Constitution is read literally, the government has stated that Article 9 of the Constitution does not deny the right to self-defense, which is recognized by international law. In recent years of 2014, there have been many movements of the government to expand the range of activities of self-defense forces. It has changed the interpretation of the Constitution, allowing the right to exercise collective self-defense, as self-defense forces are able to participate in overseas wars. In 2018, the government published a draft article to add to Article 9 of the Constitution, stating that the self-defense forces can be used if necessary with the Prime Minister as the Supreme Supervisor, regardless of the content of the original Article 9 of the Constitution. I agree with Japan having a certain amount of military force for self-defense, and the constitution being updated if necessary to suit the modern society. However, I absolutely am against a nation choosing violence as a tool of diplomacy, no matter what. So that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching. If this video helped you to deepen your understanding towards military power in Japan, please hit the like button to help me boost this video to more people. And my goal is to achieve 1 million subscribers by January 2023, so your help would mean a lot. And please check out our sub-channel and membership through the link inside the description box. Thanks again, and I'll see you in my next video. どうもありがとうございました。I personally feel that this is the most controversial topic I've ever picked up in my channel, and to be very honest, I was very scared of making this video. Depending of course on what you say about these topics, there will be people of course attacking you and bashing you about it. And again, you know, I was always very scared, so that's the reason why I've always been avoiding making topics of videos like this. But I really felt, taking a look at the current situation of the world right now, as a father of 2 daughters and as a citizen of Japan, I thought I'm responsible learning about the past, studying about the current situation in Japan and trying to prevent any violence, any killing happening in my country, trying to keep this nation as peaceful as possible for future generations. I really felt that I'm responsible to study more about this. And for me, I've always been scared and running away from these kind of topics, but I really thought making a video and talking to you, introducing these histories and backgrounds for you, making this video is probably the best way for me to study about it. So I thought this must be the timing I need to do it. I cannot run away. I am responsible for my daughters and for the children of this country. So again, please let me know about what you thought in the comments. I'd love to learn more from you. Yep, I believe how you see it in Japan, how you see it from different cultures and ideas would be completely different. So I would love to learn from you. Thank you very much for watching this video.